So please welcome Daniel McLaren. Yeah, nice to see you, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you.
So this hour totally yours. Please enjoy it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Daniel McLaren. My role has actually recently changed. So really quick, right now I'm the senior manager of product for NC West. So NC West owns ArenaNet, and I have been promoted up to their mobile division, and I'm helping do quite a bit of stuff inside that mobile division. So just kind of my background: been a lead designer, been in mobile for over 8 years. I've been in the games industry for just about 16 years. I started in MMOs, and what I do now is I help studios get ready for launch. A lot of times people hear the word product and they think, oh, this guy's a full-blown PM. That's actually not the case. I'm actually not a PM. I do some product manager work, but I am mostly focused on when we look at games and we look at studios and we think about, hey, do we want to publish them? My job really is to get into the weeds with the creative director and the studio people and say, hey, what's your user experience like? Hey, what's the game design look like? What's your economy and progression flow looking like? How's it feeling? And then ultimately, what's your live operations plan? What are you going to do? How are we going to sustain this game? And so I'm kind of a gun for hire in some regards, being able to just help people overcome some of the challenges that we've seen in the live operations and mobile space. And so what I kind of want to talk about today is a bit broad. There's multiple kind of pieces to this. And I've torn this talk down and thrown it out at least 5 times in the last couple of weeks. And I really kind of wrapped it up last night because there's just so many things about live that I really love. Like I said, I've been doing it my entire career. And the root of what I do is really about serving people. It's not about making a game for myself. It's about serving the people who love to play your game. And so I thought I'd just kind of start out and talk about where I see live operations in 2020, right? From where mobile kind of started to where we are now. And traditionally, when people talk about live operations, they're kind of limited in some of their thinking, right? We talk about limited time events. Oh, hey, we're going to run a double reward weekend. Or we talk about pack offers. Hey, what can we include in this pack? How long do we run it for? What do we run it against, right? Is there something that's kind of happening? And ultimately, this is born out of the problem that feature and live are separate divisions inside of a studio. Now some smaller studios, especially startups and studios under 20 people, that sort of stuff, there may not be a lot of separation, but still I think mentally there's a separation between feature and live and how these things are perceived. Feature is always talking about what's this next big thing, what are we going to do, what are we going to launch in 6 to 10 months. And what invariably happens is that live engineering requests get backlogged indefinitely, right? So we'll get into this a little bit more. And so what happens is live often winds up killing time between feature releases or sustaining something or fixing something. And we're kind of tasked with keeping the game alive with a limited tool set. And that limited tool set means that we're often using the same mechanics over and over and over to make it look like, hey, we're this unique, diverse, live operating game. So I have worked for several studios. I've consulted for studios around the world, from Finland, Russia, to here in the States. And so I want to kind of list some things that frustrate me that I see in a lot of places. Now, again, this doesn't mean that everybody's making this mistake. It doesn't mean that, I'm the end all be all. This is only what's happening. No, this is just in my anecdotal experience, a lot of things that I've seen. And when I play a lot of mobile games, I see some of these things manifested, right? So feature planning tends to revolve around a handful of things. First thing, how do we build something to take advantage of App Store featuring? We got Christmas coming up. We got to launch a feature so that we can get top billing in the Apple Store, or Google promised us that we would get, featuring if we do this, this, and this. And so a lot of features turn into an opportunity to gain featuring, and so you're exchanging, this kind of rigid feature set for free eyeballs on your game and free installs. And then secondarily, a lot of it's like, hey, how do we keep the late game progression going? How do we sustain retention for guilds and veteran players, right? Because they're consuming that content super quickly. And so a lot of the features are like, okay, we're gonna put in a clan wars, right? So now all our guilds can play, and it'll be this indefinite system, and people can continue to play. Cool. My question becomes, why in the world are you spending your money building features that will never change, right? You're going to build this feature, you're going to drop it in the game. You're potentially going to put a daily quest in for it. You're going to put some rewards in for the progression that they need to kind of force them into this system that you've built. But then it sits there and it's stagnant and it does its thing like the rest of the features that you've built. And Live is still struggling to keep engagement, keep retention up, and drive monetization while you work another 6 to 10 months on your next big feature. So this means that live requests often get deprioritized. Here's an example, and I've had this conversation many, many times. Hey, I really need more tools inside live operations, right? Engineering's super excited. Hey, I want to help you out because engineers are awesome. And then I say, like, I would love to take this feature that we've built and I'd love to make an event out of it. And they say, we could totally do that for you. But here's the time cost, right? Here's the investment for it. And then invariably the producer jumps in, whoa, whoa, whoa. We have a roadmap here. We have a plan. We can't do that because it's going to delay stuff. And so you get put on the backlog. And then 6 months later, the conversation starts again. So as a director of live operations, what if I had the power to take all of the things that we built, let them stay, right? So, hey, I have ranked PvP over here. I have my tower mode over here. I have, guild wars over here. What if I could say, like, hey, I have all of these great mechanics that have been built in the game. What if we could use them as Lego bricks, right? And I wanted to say, run a 2-week event. Hey, I got this idea. I want to do a 2-week event because I've seen the way my players are responding to certain things. I want to take our tower mode and I want to create a custom Iron Man mode with it. And then I want to take some of our enemy feature sets, and I want to build some customized enemies. Oh, and you know what I want to do? I want to take the public ranking functionality that we built for PvP or another thing, and I want to plug that in, and I want to have a public ranking system kind of at the end. So hey, you can get various rewards depending on how much you participated in this. But you know what? I don't want to discourage more casual players. So what if I grab my personal milestone reward system and I plug that in there too, right? So now as live, I've taken 3 or 4 features here and I've plugged them in, and I might do things like, you know what, it doesn't need to be a 99 floor Iron Man mode. Maybe it only needs to be 10, because what I'll do is I'll gate it a bit, right? So I might gate it on factions only, right? Gotcha games. How do you create value for your heroes that you're selling if you're not working with an intellectual property? Okay, I might gate it per particular faction. So players are like, oh, I really got to get this faction. Or I might gate it by star count, or maybe both. I might gate it by difficulties. I might decide to change up how enemies normally behave. The point is that it comes down to empowering live operations, right? You have this team that is able, it's living on the edge, right? We're living on the data. We're looking at it daily. So we're able to respond rapidly to things that are happening. And you know what? We talked about this just a second ago. How do I create value for things that don't have an intellectual property attached to it? Working on Star Wars has its challenges, but I'll tell you what, it's very easy to tell you that Count Dooku is valuable, because people love Count Dooku, right? It's easy for me to tell you, buy Darth Vader, because people want Darth Vader. But if I'm not using an intellectual property, how do I tell a player that this thing is important, go and buy this? Well, Live can do that. Additionally, we can be using a lot of this content in a mature game, something that's been out for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, and help accelerate players up into the fun gameplay, right? That in-game loop that we've been spending the last several years expanding and improving. Why would I keep players out. I can use events to move them through much more quickly. And sometimes a feature is better in limited capacity. We built a couple of systems across several different games that I've worked on where we've put the feature out and we found out it didn't resonate as well with our players as we thought it would. And so, we didn't roll the feature out very slowly. What we did is we just like built it, thought this is what they wanted, dropped it, and it had a bit of a spike, and then it just kind of fell off. And the only reason people were engaging with it is because we encouraged them to through rewards that we put in the mode, and also like daily quests. Go do this thing every day. But what if I could take a feature and say, you know what? When I look at the data, I see that if I bring this in as an event, it's actually more powerful. I actually get more engagement. I get more. I increase my LTV. My revenue's going up. My retention's going up. And when I take it away, the fall off isn't dramatic, right? People are staying in the game. And when I bring it back, I see a bump. And so sometimes it's okay for a feature to have limited availability. And it's a great opportunity to, so Clash Royale did this, right? They would build a feature, they'd test it out, run it as an event. If it didn't work out, they pull it out. That's how they got the two versus two mode in there, right? It was built as a thing, they played it as an event, people loved it, and then they dropped it in as a permanent thing. There's a lot of advantages to building your features like a Lego brick and engaging with live to do this. And let's be real here. Event diversity is monetization diversity. You have more variety in your play types and your event types and things for people to do, that you can have many more premium pack types, right? That address very specific things about the event. And we want to continue to generate synergy with our battle pass and our VIP systems. And all of this is really designed to encourage the stability of what we would call our committed players. So I've used a word there that is a metric that I have used internally at a couple of places. And I want to talk about the committed player. You might have already heard this. This comes from a man by the name of Mike Verdu, who was a VP at Kabam, eventually came over to EA. And I think he's at Scopely now, as everybody seems to be. Anyway, so he kind of brought us this committed player metric. And I want to just take a few minutes to define it and then show an example about it. A committed player is a player that we look at has logged in every single day for the last 7 days in a row. They haven't missed a day. And they've spent some form of money in the last 48 hours. Okay, so come back every day for 7 days, and I spent money in the last rolling 48 hours. Doesn't matter how much. Why do we care about these people? Because this is a top line metric for your game's health, right? That's a big bucket of people. It doesn't, because we're not separating them by spend. We're not separating them by region. We're saying like, hey, overall, how many people are actually committed to our game, that they're consistently logging in and consistently spending? And people are going to come and go out of this bucket. Even your whales are going to come and go out of this bucket, right? They might drop a big chunk of cash at the start of the week, logging in every single day, but then kind of dip out for a little bit, and then next week drop some more. So the bucket's always, at the edges, growing and shrinking. What we want to do here is we're using this to kind of get a quick look. How healthy is our game? If I see huge day over day declines, or I see huge week over week declines, and I don't see the standard recovery pattern, immediately, I don't need to start digging into the data to go like, is there a problem? Like, it's an immediate thing that indicates there's a problem, and live needs to be looking at what's happening. Has something happened? Are we changing something? It's been too long since we've released something. And it's also a great method, pre-segmentation, for me to start digging into player behavior. And it makes it a lot easier for my team to figure out what we need to do next. And I'll give you an example here. Okay, so this is just some examples, and people use them differently. This is how I tend to use it. So first thing I do is I say, I'm looking at my committed player base right now for this week, and I say, show me everybody who's been here in the committed player bucket, who's been in the game for 30 days or more. And I'm gonna segment them a little bit, right? So I want that first group to say, I want to look at everybody who finished their dailies every day and then immediately just leave the game. So like I come in, I do my dailies, I leave, right? That's one group. The second group is I come in, I do all my dailies, and then I continue playing for a minimum of 30 minutes or more, right? So I came in, I did my dailies, and I'm sticking around all day. Now, here's an interesting group. I'm looking at people who come in, they don't finish all their dailies, but they stay in the game for like the day, right? Several hours. So my first question is going to be, what are these people who are committed to my game? They're coming back every day and they're spending money. What are they doing when they stay? What are the features that they're engaging with, right? As a live ops guy, this is what I want to know. I want to, hey, what are you doing when you come into my game? And the people who didn't finish their dailies, right? What did they leave incomplete? And is it a consistent thing? Because what I want to know is, do I have a feature that I have asked players to complete through the daily quest system or some other method, right? Some other reward system that players hate? Because I don't want people doing something they absolutely hate in my game. If I have to twist your arm to run your PvP dailies every day, and the majority of my player base is not even finishing their dailies in PvP, why in the world would I want to build a feature, spend 6 to 10 months building a feature, PvP related, that the majority of my committed players are not engaging with? That's a waste of time. So then my next question is, people who finish their dailies and leave immediately, right? That first group. Hey, I just come in every day. I spend 45 minutes in the game. I do my dailies and I leave. Are these people at risk of churning? And is there something we can do to re-engage these people? So that's just kind of an example of how valuable this group is. And then once I know this data, I can segment more deeply. It's faster for me to answer top line questions with this group of players because I don't need to dig in as deep on segmentation and figure out like, which group did what. So if I can use this to see some top line information, this is actually really good because now the team collectively can use this. Hey, are we delivering features that players want to engage with, right? I just talked about this. If we drop in a new feature like when we dropped in ships for Star Wars Galaxy Heroes, after that initial excitement, engagement just kind of really cratered. So I want to know, is this going to impact engagement? When I launch an event, same question, but even more deeply, if I take my group of committed players and then I segment a second group and I say, hey, these are the people who were committed players consistently, right? They became a committed player more than 5 times over the last 6 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever my window is. And they haven't re-engaged in what I would consider to be their normal re-engagement cycle. Is my event re-engaging those people? Am I turning those people back into committed players? If not, why? Did they even play it? And is that group, is it staying healthy? Right. And now what this does is it creates a common language for all of your disparate teams to start speaking. So I can go to PM, I can go to design, feature design, I can go to engineering, I can go to art, and we have a language that is common. Hey, our committed players really love this thing. And it really helps live not put unnecessary requests on feature, right? Now I don't need to go and ask for an advanced PvP mode. But let's face it, this is actually the easiest part of live operations, right? Mobile and data goes together like peanut butter and chocolate. And if you hate those two things, just trust me, they theoretically go together. So what is the hardest part? Well, the hardest part is the internal relationships, right? It's the people, it's the positions of authority, it's the clear definition of roles, it's solving what players want, right? We can look at data till the cows come home, but if we have dysfunctional internal relationships, live is always going to be in an adversarial position, and we don't want that, right? We are here to serve and help and lift up and carry just as much as every other division within the game. So I really want to change how people think about feature and live, and I really want to just see them as two parts of a whole. And we'll get into the PM, the product management and live operations and design aspect after this, because I think that's a separate thing that is worthy of talking about. But for the moment, I want to talk about how live interacts with feature design and feature leadership. Okay, so the feature creative director and the live ops director, they have to be peers, not just friends. They don't need to be friends. They have to have respect for each other, but organizationally, they must be peers because there can't be an imbalance here. Ideally, your live ops director should have some form of a design background and be data minded, right? So you don't want somebody who's a complete and total product manager in there. You don't want somebody who's just a designer. You want somebody who has live experience, who's thinking about how design resonates with players and knows where we're going on this kind of long-term thing. So we have several phases here where these two individuals or two groups interact with each other, because there may be a live lead game designer, there may be a feature lead game designer. So there may be a few more people, but I'm talking kind of at the top because we set the tone for our subordinates and we set the tone for the studio in a lot of ways. So there's the concept phase, right? This is where, so I'll talk a bit about my previous creative director, who I love dearly, Justin Jones, really great guy. He and I worked very well together. And so when a feature would start coming up, that's where I would start getting engaged. So he and I would sit down, we'd have the conversation. What do we need to build? What is happening in live? What do we see people want to do? We think we need to build this feature because it's this or that. And so I'm contributing, right? I'm part of that initial design process. Once that design process is kind of wrapped and we've all agreed, hey, this is definitely what we need. And I've given in my input, hey, we need this, and this for live. We need to be able to make sure we do this. We'll need this tool set to support it. And, all of the design kind of gets done and that design is ready to go. This is kind of where live teams engagement stops. Not completely. We'll talk about this in a second, because now we're moving into production, right? So now it's like, hey, it's going to go to the producers. We're going to assign it points, engineers, artists. Everybody's going to tear it apart and we're going to look at it. But once the work starts, I can back off. And now I only need to really engage if the creative director, comes over and says, hey, we've encountered this problem. We need to rethink X, or we need to talk about a change that we need to do. But for the most part, I'm just going to be really involved in milestone check-ins. Hey, I'm going to go look at the build. I'm going to see where we are. I'm going to approve that. Yeah, it's looking great. And now I'm going to start shifting my work to the live side. Hey, we need to prepare because live is going to be doing the implementation on this. So I need to work with my PM. I need to work with any other designers that are going to wind up working on this. So up to now, we've got the feature ownership, right? And now it's kind of 50-50 here. Now it's going to start the handoff to live. So the handoff happens when everything's done. We own it now 100%, right? We're doing all the game data implementation. We're doing all the balance. We're testing it with live QA. And then, of course, deployment. And then we're supporting it completely. So that's how we've done this in the past. I've done this at a couple different places. I find that this is one of the more effective things. I've always had the good fortune of the live team, especially the live design team, being a little bit larger than some of the other teams. So, we had more designers, so we could support things a bit more rapidly. So let's take a minute here and just dig just a little bit deeper. I just want to talk about a few quick notes here. It's important to remember the creative director is the vision holder. They are this is their game, right? They are the vision holder. They're like, hey, I want this to be about cows. Okay, fine, cool. You're the vision holder. You're driving this. I'm here to support you. And they're focused on that feature development. Where is this game going? Is it staying on brand? And I'm responsible for the execution of that direction, right? The day-to-day live decisions, balance, economy, events, monetization, responding to committed players. It's my responsibility to keep the creative director, the PM and I are responsible for keeping the creative director informed and helping him set that tone. And once that design is settled and production begins, I need to step back and start engaging PM. And we're all about preparing for that handoff. So I'm going to start getting into the PM relationship now. Before I get into the PM and design relationship, I want to just set a couple of quick notes. And I think everybody knows this, but I don't want to assume, right? Traditional game development has always used systems designers to handle progression, economy, rewarding, because they were all in service of the gameplay. They were not gated in any way except by time spent, right? So you just had a systems designer who was like, I'm going to itemize, or I'm going to handle the progression on this, or whatever. When mobile really started to take off, we saw the introduction of the PM. And in turn, we saw the introduction of what I would call more cynical progression models, right? So deliberately creating pinch points, not to encourage a player to go grind or to go and make sure that they've got all the best gear, but actually to drive spend. And it was a time where we were looking at things like, how do we get people to spend in the first 3 days, first 7 days? And so our mindset, since mobile has really come in, we've seen a lot of change, right? We're not concerned as much about day 7 anymore. Now it's just a health indicator. Hey, are we just losing people? It's not necessarily about conversion. But now the questions we ask ourselves are, how do I create a brand? How do I create something where people want to be in my game for a year? How do I have a game that I build and it generates revenue for 7 to 10 years? That's a much different mindset than, okay, I'm just going to drive a bunch of people through, and as long as I get them to monetize before they leave by day 30 or day 15, cool, I'm good. We don't think like that anymore. And this is partly because there's an intersection of the art of game design, right? These soft skills, how do I know what people want? How do I think something's fun? And some harder skills, the science of data. And you know what, here's the thing. Sometimes it is okay for us to say, I might get this immediate sale, but that's not the most important thing. I'd rather have this person stay for a year in my game. So I'll sacrifice a little bit of short-term revenue for long-term retention. And you know what, designers, sometimes it's okay to pinch the player and encourage some spending because we need to survive, right? So this is where the relationship between product management, live operations, and design comes together, because they're best friends. And they don't necessarily need to be best friends, but the relationship is probably the most critical in the studio. If there is adversity between those two groups, it turns the balance of power very much from, hey, let us make a great game for the player, into, I'm telling you, do this thing. And it's something that I have seen really hurt studios and hurt games, and you lose really good people. Unfortunately, it's your studio culture that's invariably going to define this relationship. And I'm not picking on people. There are a lot of studios who've made a lot of money. And I think it's safe to say there are studios who are very focused on the dollar, the bottom line. I need to make this revenue, and nothing else matters to me but this revenue. And there are other studios whose mindset is a bit more like, you know what, as long as we're profitable, we want to make a great game, and everything in between. And so your leadership is going to set the tone, and potentially going to be hiring people who reflect the studio leadership's outlook. So a lot of times you're not empowered to change that. But if you are, I highly encourage thinking about the things we're going to talk about next. And we're getting close to wrapping up here. It's important that your product manager isn't just a numbers person, right? I'm not looking for an accountant. I'm not looking for somebody who's an Excel wizard. Obviously, those are very, very important skills, but I need somebody who actually loves what we're doing here, and is at least trying to understand the design aspect of the game. They don't need to be a great designer. They don't even need to be a designer. So another guy that I've worked with in the past, a gentleman by the name of Sam Abbott, probably one of the best PMs I have ever worked with. Prior to him coming on, our PM staff was very focused on their models, right? If they modeled something, they believed that model was perfect. I don't think they thought that explicitly. Well, my model's perfect. I refuse to listen to any. But they were very confident in their own abilities, and there was no relationship with design. And it was a real struggle, because when things wouldn't work in the game, we didn't have common language. We couldn't talk about what needed to be changed or how we could improve. Is it rewards? Is it availability of items? Like what's the problem here? So when Sam came on board, he and I immediately became friends. We had a lot of common ground. We both love music. He's a fantastic musician. I'm an amateur. We both loved the same type of games. He's huge into Persona series, as was I. And so we had this common ground that we could talk about. And I remember there were many times where we would get into a position where, either I looked at the model and I would say like, this feels too aggressive. And sometimes he would, we could sit and talk like, hey, you remember when you were doing this thing in this game and it felt like this and we hated that wall that we ran into, or we did this thing that felt really good. Why did it feel really good? Because they rewarded our time appropriately. So we had this language that we could discuss. And there were many times where, he would say to me like, I agree, but unfortunately, I have something coming down from a higher authority. We have to hit this number because we're closing quarter. And for me, it was easy to go like, yeah, okay, look, thanks for explaining it to me. I understand that. We can make that work. And I was able to do that because many times in the conversation, I would tell him like, dude, this just feels really bad. And he would ask me why, what is it? And we would go through it and work through it. And then he'd be like, you know what? All right, let's make some changes here. Let's change this. Let's move some of this over here and do some of this. And so it was a really, really great relationship. One of the best guys I've ever worked with. I'd work with him again in a heartbeat. But consequently, that also means that your live lead should not just be a designer, right? I tell this to so many young designers who want to come in. Every designer who's ever reported to me, this is one of the things I constantly work on with them. When I set goals for them for their new year, when I do performance reviews, this line right here is the single most important mindset change for a designer to be successful. What I mean by this, that you're designing for others and not themselves. How many times, and maybe you haven't, but I've heard this many times over the years. How many times have you heard a designer say, I want to do that because it's cool? Or I think it's cool, I would play that. The thing is that in my career, I have very rarely worked on a game that I would go to the store and buy off the shelf. It's just the nature of the job. That's okay. I'm not bothered by it. I think of myself like a Dungeons and Dragons DM. I'm telling a story. This is for other people to enjoy. My delight comes from watching a player solve a problem and get excited about it, or earn the next step of their reward and tell everybody about it. That's the stuff that's exciting to me. It doesn't matter what the context of the game. It could be Pretty Pony Princesses Online for all I care. If I know who my target audience is, I know who my committed players are, and I'm creating things that are keeping people engaged, that's the joy that I get. And that's how I want designers to think. It is not your game. You didn't spend money out of pocket to build it yourself. And if you did, props to you. Then you can do whatever you want. If it's your game, go for it. You're working for somebody else, and we're serving others, right? And so I need designers who are not thinking about themselves. They're thinking about the player. And they need to strive to understand that this is a business. We do need to sustain. I've got a lot of people who work for us who have families and kids, and they want a better future for their kids. So that means that we need to be healthy as a studio so that everybody who's working there is supported. We don't need to be cynical to our player. We don't need to abuse our player, but we do need to be mindful. This is a job. This is a business. We do need to be profitable, because if we're profitable, we can do more things, right? We can do better things. I have passed on interviews on many qualified candidates who had the wrong mindset. I have passed on PMs who have tried to impress me with their cynicism, their ruthlessness. I'm gonna get, I sold a pack like this and I got 4,000 people to buy it. It's like, oh, cool. I'm not interested in that mindset. Consequently, I have passed on designers who mock product managers. I'm not interested in that. That's not the attitude I want in the studio, because we have to build a relationship between all divisions of a game studio. So now I've kind of touched on that. I want to talk about now, how is work divided, right? So traditionally speaking, as far as I have seen, you may have a different experience, but in the multiple studios I've been in, we talked about a couple slides ago how in the past, systems designers handled a lot of these models or the things that they want to do. And in mobile studios, I find that it is the reverse. The PM traditionally handles everything related to progression, economy, rewards, monetization. They'll do their models in Excel and then hand it to live and just for blind implementation. Hey, I need you to, okay, it's time for you to implement this. And so this implementation stage just turns into, I've got two designers, one who's implementing rewards for this new system, another designer who's implementing packs to be sold without any input from live, right? Now, PM might be working with analytics and they have a relationship there, but live has no relationship with the PM. And I've seen that more times than I can count. And one of the ways that I offset this, we talked about it a couple slides ago, right? Creating that relationship with the PM. I'm forging a relationship with them. That individual and I are working together. This is another one of those things that I either recommend one of two things. If it's a senior PM, like somebody who's like a director of PM or whatever, then the director of PM and a live ops director should be peers, and there's no need for the PM to report to live. If you don't have a director of PM and you just have a senior PM, then I recommend that they potentially report to the live director. But the point being is that there should be as much of an equal footing there as possible, just like the equal footing between live and feature, because I'm not looking to bully people. I need PM. I need them to tell me the things that are in my blind spot. So as much of a peer relationship as you can have there. So when we have that peer relationship, I can then assign a designer to work to dotted line basically to the PM and say, hey, designer A, you're going to work with the PM here. You guys are going to be working on rewards and progression. And I've had a conversation with the PM. The PM's going to delegate work to them because I want my designers to be PM minded, right? And they can't be PM minded if they don't learn how the system works. And they're not responsible for designing things that work, right? So a bad designer is somebody who designs stuff, puts it out in the wild, and then has like no input back, right? I don't know if it worked with the player. I don't care if it worked with the player. I don't know if it succeeded or failed. In the same way, I cannot expect my designers to be PM minded if they don't build a reward model, put it out into the wild, and see how it responds, right? So in this relationship, what do I expect from my designer? I expect them to advocate for that intangible, right? That feel, the player experience. Well, I know this feels good. Well, why? You can't put data saying how it feels, but as a designer, we should at least have some intuition, some gut, because that's what's driving us when we don't have data, right? And the PM's job, we talked about this a little bit ago, is to advocate for the financial health of the studio. And so these two people are working in a symbiotic relationship with each other, challenging the work. The best work we do is vetted and challenged by our peers and tested by the data and run through the gauntlet of fire of our players, right? That's the best work that we do. And so the future of what we are doing here rests on the work between these two. Yes, feature and live having their relationship. It's very important, but let's be real here. The PM live adversarial relationship will do far more damage than an adversarial feature and live relationship, because look, we have games and we've made a lot of money with live and feature not being integrated, right? As being kind of separate beasts with very little integration. So we know that it's not desirable. There's so much being left on the table. We're leaving a lot of money and opportunity on the table by not integrating feature and live, but it's not killing the game. Now, that said, I think when studios start integrating and players start seeing a better live experience, I think it's going to hurt, right? It will come back to it eventually. But PM and live having an adversarial relationship will immediately start undermining the game and the studio, and you'll start an attrition of good employees that you don't want to lose. So how do we establish this? as the live director, it is my responsibility to get with the head of PM and for the two of us to sit with the studio leadership and figure out what are we trying to do here, right? Once we know where we're going as a studio and as a game, it's easy for the PM and I to sit down and say, like, what is our philosophy here? How do we monetize? What is the philosophy of progression? What does it mean to have rewards? How do we motivate players? So then there's never any surprises, right? When the PM's like, hey, I was working on a model. I'd like you to take a look at it. I'm not going to look at it and be like, what is this? This is so cynical. Because that can't happen when the two of us have defined the philosophy that permeates the department, and then studio leadership blesses it and says, like, yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. That's the kind of thing. That's the kind of studio we are. That's where we're going. So you see what's happening. There's this like triangle, and the bottom of that triangle is the core of what we believe as employees and as a team, and we're able to kind of work without somebody looking over our shoulder. And I kind of already said this, but I think it bears repeating. These are not opposing roles. These are complementary roles. Look, if you have opposing factions in your studio, it's a people problem. It's a people problem. You either have people who are more concerned about themselves, their career trajectory, the authority that they have, and the power, or you have toxic senior leadership who's seeding, a bad studio. A good PM is invaluable and makes our studio stronger. And the problem here is defining what is a good PM, right? So we're challenging the norms that we have held in our industry for a long time. In this entire talk, I'm about to wrap up here in a second. In this entire talk, everything that I've talked about, with the exception of like how I would like features to be designed as like Lego bricks, all of this comes from practical experience, either things I've done or been under, studios I've helped and seen successful, or things that have gone so wrong when I've done the postmortem. I'm like, these are all practicals. These are all things that have happened, and I want to see brought together in studios holistically. I want to see our new future here. So let's wrap this up. I can't see if questions have come in yet. I'm literally looking at my slides, and I want to take a look here in just a second. Ultimately, we can't evolve live if we don't lean into it. Guys, this is the most diverse team, right? We can move quickly. We're not bound to a 6 to 10 month timeline. We're bound to a 2-week timeline. Let's go. Okay, let's do this. Events are massively underutilized. There's so much money, retention, engagement being left on the table because you're not empowering live to take all of this work that you've spent 2 or 3 years working on is just sitting there, idle, wasted, not being used. Why? I don't understand. We're not clearly defining leadership, right? We need to empower, define, and establish our leadership roles, because when gray areas exist, many bad things happen. And look, I left out a lot of people, right? EPs, producers, DDs, there's leads. There's so many people as a part of this. I didn't have the time to do a whole talk that would address all of these things. Utilizing our committed player metric, great top line way to look at what people are doing. And look, PM and Live are best friends, and they always should be. Thank you. That's what I'm doing. So I'm available to talk with people. This is my email. I encourage you to reach out to me directly. If you're a studio who's looking to get publishing support, NC has been expanding their mobile division, and this is why I was brought on and promoted up into this role, is so that I could help NC find and help build smaller studios. So if you want to talk about that, please email me. I would love to help you knock it out of the park.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Pleasure.
That was amazing. We have a few questions. So
cool. Let's go.
Understand your idea is not to force players to do something they hate daily, but there are a lot of successful games that force players to do this, especially to engage them to some non-popular activity.
Yep.
World of Warcraft and daily quests in it, for example. How is it possible?
So, I mean, look, we are always trying to encourage players to do the things that we like them to do. Just because it's being done right now doesn't necessarily mean that's the best way to do it, right? We could say that about a lot of things. You could have asked me that question 8 years ago about the Zynga Farmville, drive people through and monetize them as quickly as possible. And I would say, like, cool, it's working, but is that the right thing? Like, is that what we really want to be doing? So really what we ask ourselves is there a better way to do this? Now, this is where the power of live operations comes in. You have a team who can test a million things for you if you've given them the tools, right? If I don't have these feature tools, right, feature built in the way that empowers live, well, yeah, then it's really hard to test a lot of things, right? How do I fix PvP? Well, I don't know because I can't actually test variations on PvP, right? How do I fix the daily quest? Well, I don't know because I can't dynamically update and change quests to respond to events, right? So you're right, it is working right now, and it is a great first step. But what are you doing to find out? Number one, what are you doing to find out the things that people hate doing? And number two, what are you doing to make it a better experience so we can slow down some churn, so we can improve our retention and potentially increase LTV?
Okay, thank you. And the following question, how exactly thinking get money from players in first 3 days now can hinder the goal to make successful game for next 10 years?
Can you repeat the question one more time? Sorry.
Yes, how exactly thinking get money from players in first 3 days now can hinder the goal to make successful game for next 10 years?
So I think it's the attitude, right? And let me see if I understand this question correctly. What you're asking me is that, I kind of talked about the early mentality where we were saying, they were trying to get money, convert players to spend immediately. And that was, and then they were like, well, if they bounce by 15 days, at least we got money out of them. So these are not mutually exclusive, right? So it's okay if you have, look, one of the things we want to do, and this is a common tactic, right? We're like, hey, you got your first hero, here's a power-up kit for $5. I'm not saying we should not attempt to monetize players as quickly as possible. I'm all for it, right? If somebody is loving what they're doing, if they're excited about the game, I want to give them opportunity to engage with us, right? Look, there's a lot of players whose mind is strictly free to play. They're like, I will never spend. There's nothing you can do. But then there's a lot of people like myself. I've got more money than time in a lot of ways. And so it's easier for me to look at things that I'm really excited about, engage with it, and go like, cool, I can get into the game right away by spending. So I'm happy you gave me a good offer. So these are not mutually exclusive. You can keep doing this. This is great. If you can get them to spend in 3 days, the first 3 days, and you're treating them with respect, awesome. More power to you. That's the way we need to be doing this.
Awesome. Thank you. And one question from me. All this coronavirus pandemic, did it affect you anyway?
Yeah, it's made us more money. I don't want to be cynical about it. So I remember a story being told to me. I don't know if this is apocryphal or how true this is, but I was talking to a colleague at one point many, many years ago, and I've always had the mindset that I'm very, very fortunate to do the job that I do, that people don't need us. They don't need entertainment digital. If worse comes to worse and people found themselves in a really terrible position, you can go outside, pick up a stick and a rock and play baseball, right? People have been entertaining themselves for years without us. That said, when times get rough, entertainment tends to be a space where people feel like they can escape, feel a little bit of relief, have a little bit of fun. And so I think the games that have really respected their players the most, now there's casino games and that you're getting into gambling and all that sort of stuff, but the games who've really respected their players the most, we've seen a lot of increased engagement because people can't do the things that they wanted to do.
Yeah, I totally see your point, and that's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
But we never thought about this.
Right.
before.
Well, and the thing is, it's like what we do ultimately, and this is that live mentality, right? Like our job in live is to respond, right?
Mhm.
And there's a million things to respond to. The coronavirus, changing player behaviors, a competitor release, rising CPIs. There's always something that live is responding to. And this kind of goes back. If I've built that core team and I've established this better philosophy within a studio, it is easier for us to respond to the need of the player, to the need of the product, right? But I'm going to have a harder time being successful if there's a lot of adversary, if there's a lot of missing data, if there's a lack of a tool set. I'm just hurting my ability to respond to the players at that point or to the situation.
Thank you, Daniel. That was awesome. Thank you for your
My pleasure.
speech. Thank you for your answers. That's all for today. It was nice to have you. Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
See you and have a good day.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Bye.